Chapter 8, The Elephant Stroll. As Zoe got closer to the elephant enclosure, she spotted David inside, putting fresh straw in Oscar and Bertie's cozy shelter. "Hi, Zoe," he called, smiling. "How are you feeling?" "Better. I would have hated to miss Bertie's first walk," Zoe explained. David nodded. "I thought we could take them to the water lily lake. Bertie can paddle in the shallow water, and maybe we could convince Oscar to try it too." "Bertie's going to be so excited to go for a walk around the zoo," Zoe whispered to Meep, "and I think he'll love the lake." "But Zoe, do you really think Oscar will want to wait a little?" Meep asked, frowning. Zoe shook her head. "No, I don't, but there are a lot of nice trees around the lake and mud for him to cool down in, so I'm sure he'll have fun anyway." Zoe went with David to keep some treats for the elephants to help keep them from wandering off on their walk. Zoe knew she could tell Bertie which way to go, but she was sure he'd like some treats too. Meep scampered ahead eagerly, and when they arrived back at the enclosure, the tiny lemur had already told the elephants to get ready for their walk. Oscar looked very pleased, and Bertie was so excited he was racing around in circles. David walked ahead of them to clear the path through the zoo, and Zoe strolled between Oscar and Bertie. For every 5 steps she took, Oscar took just one slow giant step. Zoe could feel the path shake beneath her feet as the huge creature plodded along next to her. Bertie kept rushing to look inside each new enclosure they passed. A lot of the other zoo creatures grunted, squeaked, or roared hello as the group walked by. Oscar and Bertie raised their trunks to say hello back. After a few minutes, Bertie turned to Oscar and Zoe and gave a puzzled squeal. Zoe giggled. "You haven't seen any animals with trunks like yours, Bertie, because there aren't any. Only elephants have them." That's cute. Bertie shook his head in disbelief, but Oscar nodded gently. Agreeing with Zoe, the little elephant trumpeted again curiously. "Well, I use my hands to pick up things, and Meep uses his little paws," Zoe explained. "Some animals have strong jaws to carry things, like the lions and tigers. And the pelicans use their clever bills to scoop up the fish. And some animals carry everything they need on their backs, like the tortoises. Every creature is different." Bertie stretched out his trunk in front of his face and gave a noisy toot. He was even more proud of his trunk now that he understood how special it was. The zoo is busy now, and the visitors they passed couldn't believe their eyes as the funny group walked by. Zoe beamed proudly as they pulled out their cameras and phones to take photos. "Can I touch the little one?" one very tiny girl asked shyly. "Of course," Zoe said, leaning forward. She whispered, "Hold still," in Bertie's ear. The girl patted his head, then laughed delightfully as the baby elephant curled his trunk around her middle for a hug. Suddenly a voice snapped, "David! There you are! I've been looking all over for you." "Oh, no," grumbled Meep as Mr. Pinch marched over. "Why does horrid old Mr. Pinch always spoil the fun?" "I need to discuss the results from Way Day with you, Mr. Pinch continued bossily. "Come to my office, please. It will take only a moment." He shot Zoe and Meep a mean look and added, "And then I'd like to know why certain people are not at school on a school day." David hesitated, then nodded. "Will you be all right, Zoe? Keep going, and I'll catch up with you two in a minute or two. Don't lose any elephants," he teased, grinning. Zoe smiled back as David and Mr. Pinch headed down the path. She wasn't sure she could ever manage to lose something so big. Zoe waved to some other visitors and watched as David and Mr. Pinch strolled out of sight. Walking through the zoo with 2 elephants was even slower than walking with just Oscar. All the visitors wanted them to stop and have their photos taken with Oscar and Bertie. "You're never going to get to the lake," Meep chattered in Zoe's ear. "Let's take a shortcut through the hippo enclosure," Zoe suggested as they passed the enclosure door. "I'm sure Hetty the baby hippo would love to meet baby Bertie." She pressed her special paw print necklace to the door and led the 2 elephants inside. The hippo enclosure was a big flat pasture full of grass for the hippos to eat and a big muddy lake for them to wallow in. Zoe shaded her eyes from the sun and saw the shape of all the hippos, Humphrey, Hilda, Helena, and baby Hetty. Some in the pasture, some in the lake, their heads just poking out of the water like big rocks. When he saw the glittering water, Bertie trumpeted loudly in excitement. Before Zoe could stop him, the little elephant trotted straight to the water's edge to dip his feet in and started splashing around playfully. Bertie, no, Zoe called. That's not the Water Lily Lake. That's the Hippo Lake. It's quite deep, and I don't think they want to be disturbed by a baby elephant. Please come out. Oscar hung back near the enclosure fence, eyeing the water nervously. It's okay, Zoe said as she turned to soothe the old elephant, stroking his warm ears and patting his trunk. But Oscar looked more and more nervous. Suddenly, he looked over Zoe's head and gave a huge trumpet. Zoe heard the alarm in Oscar's call and whirled around. She gasped, her heart thudding hard in her chest. While she wasn't looking, Bertie had waded even further into the lake, and now he was struggling to stay above the water. The little elephant was in big trouble. And we'll have to see. Hopefully it's called a watery rescue tomorrow. Hopefully they can get him out. Stay tuned till tomorrow.